Principles of graphical evidence and give you a bunch of links and examples of things that I think are really cool. So graphical evidence, you should convey substance, not methodology, graphic design, or art. You're supposed to be avoiding distorting your data. So instead of trying to emphasize how nice your picture can be, you want to be talking about what does the data actually say. And you want to show it in a pretty way if you can, but the first focus is on letting the data speak for itself. You want to make large data sets coherent into one image, so you want to be able to take a large amount of information and distill it down to its core essence, while still allowing yourself to be able to, one, easily compare different pieces of data. So if you recall in the Tufty color example, you could easily compare the story of that person next to the clean pump at the top versus somebody who was right next to the Broad Street pump. You can also reveal both a broad overview and finer details of the data. And this is what I absolutely adore about my favorite graphic, which is of the United States Congress. And here I am a United States Congress nerd. So this is my favorite graphic because it lets you see a broad overview of the entire history of the United States. You can find this by Googling Congress XKCD. And you've got Republicans in red, you've got Democrats in blue. This starts in the 1790s at the bottom and goes all the way up to the modern day. And what you can see here is that the United States Congress is getting more polarized, which you see because you see a lot of moderates and light colors in the middle in this area, and that suddenly disappears once we get into the modern era. We are more polarized today than we used to be. You can see so many tiny details in here if you would like to, but you can also see the very broad overview. Now, this is beautiful, but it's not beautiful at the expense of the data. You should be serving an important and clear purpose, such as describing the data, exploring the data, or tabulating the data. So you shouldn't be trying to explore the data and tell a story at the same time. If your goal is to just try and understand what the data says without any preconceptions, that should be your focus. If you switch to talking about a particular story, then you should reevaluate how you're presenting that data accurately, not trying to bias it, but so that it emphasizes the story that you're telling. You want to closely interweave and expand on statistical and verbal descriptions, so clearly label the graphic and provide explanations with words when needed. Another thing that this US Congress graphic does absolutely beautifully. You've got tons of text if you want to look at it. You don't have to, though. You can look at the picture and understand what's going on without seeing all the words. But it does incentivize you to go and dive into congressional history by looking at that graphic. Use position and length to depict information instead of area or angle, unless you have very good reasons to violate that principle. And this is one of the questions on your homework, is to use the reading from Healy to help you to answer which kinds of visualizations more effectively communicate what you want to say and lets the users interpret it accurately. You want to minimize the ink usage to avoid unnecessary clutter. You want to give data context relevant to the point, even if it increases ink space. So don't get rid of ink just because you want to. Get rid of it because it doesn't serve a purpose. Maintain proportionality in 2D or 1D. We are generally viewing things in 2 dimensions, so keep that in mind when you're using your space. That said, once we get later into the course, we're going to create some 3-dimensional graphics that I think are really valuable, but that's courtesy of modern technology. Money over time should be measured appropriately, accounting for inflation, standardized units, per capita, per state, per relevant category. So here's a bunch of graphics that I think might be useful. The New York Times has some of the best graphics in the world, graphic designers in the world. They have some of the best people of trying to interweave visualizations, data, and storytelling together. So when you look at the New York Times, keep them in mind as being potentially really valuable sources. Flowing Data has a bunch of really beautiful data sets. You've got some awards for the best visualizations of the web for various time periods. For those of you who use Reddit, there's an entire Reddit devoted to beautiful data. And then I chose my particular favorite graphic from the New York Times, which shows where people in each state were born, which is a really fun one because you get to track how much each state is growing or shrinking over time. And I'll go ahead and bring that over here. And you can see, hey, look, California. People who are born in California generally stay in California, but if they do move, they move to the West. I'm a California native. I am one of the very few, apparently, who was born in California and then moved to the Northeast. Whoops, I guess I'm unusual. If you look at people who are living in California, slightly less than half of them were born in California. You've got a lot of people who are moving into California. You can do this for, I believe, all of the states. It's a really cool graphic. Got a bunch of bad graphics. You'll be doing this for your homework, isolating a particularly bad graphic and arguing why it is bad based on these principles. So we've got another Reddit thread, data is ugly. You've got a flowing data graphic for ugly visualizations, and you've got a statistics how-to misleading graphs links. There's a ton of information about the cholera graph that I showed. And one's from The Guardian, and 2 of these links are from ucla.edu, so University of California, Los Angeles. You can go and dive into your heart's content and learn more about exactly how John Snow developed his theory and how he decided to present it.